So welcome everyone to this session, today 24th of September. We continue with our conversations in celebration of International Peace Day. This year, the theme is Shaping Peace Together, and we have been hosting a number of conversations throughout the week about different ways in which alumni of IofC USA programs and their friends and colleagues, members of organizations that they are part of and collaborate with have been shaping peace together in different parts of the world. For today's session, we will have a very meaningful conversation about two movements that had been emerging for a number of years in different parts of the world. I'm talking about Black Lives Matter and Dalit Lives Matter. And those of you who are based in the US know that today it's a day for reflection as well, given the current situation. So I will pass it before I start the session to Ram to give us a space for reflection about what is happening currently in the US.
Greetings.
Ram, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I would like to ask everyone, if you want, to participate in a grounding exercise to acknowledge the common struggle of Black Lives Matter and Dalit Lives Matter. And in this grounding exercise, it's around awareness of our truth in the present moment, and it's also using something that has caused a lot of trauma in terms of the structural racism and systemic oppression of Black and brown bodies. The phrase "I can't breathe" has resonated around the world. And so I like to offer a form of using the breath as resistance and as an expression of our commitment to the liberation and humanity of all people around the world, all people, and in particularly making a reference to honoring the life of Breonna Taylor and our dissatisfaction, but it's not a surprise that the grand jury did not do justice in honoring the life of Breonna Taylor and for many, many others. So the idea behind it is to use our breath as a form of resistance, that we can breathe and we will continue to breathe for freedom and justice and liberation for people who are suffering under these systems of oppression. So if you could just find a position that works for you, whether it's sitting, standing, lying down, it's all up to you. Finding your, noticing probably your feet, how they're positioned, what your shoulders are feeling like, where your hands are placed, and then noticing, like, what is your breathing pattern right now? Just acknowledging your breath and the breath being connected to our life force. And then let's just engage in something that's called the stress breath, which involves inhaling into the back of our throat, holding the breath, and then exhaling through the nose, making an audible sound. I'll demonstrate. So inhaling through the back of the throat, into the back of the throat, then bringing the chin to the chest, holding the breath, and as we exhale, exhale through the nose with the mouth closed, almost like we're breathing into a mirror and it's fogging up the mirror. So taking a deep breath in through the back of the throat, bringing the chin down to the chest, holding the breath, releasing, and then exhaling through the nose with the mouth closed, making an audible sound. If you want, you can take your glasses off and close your eyes. It's up to you. Inhaling again into the back of the throat. bringing the chin to the chest, releasing the chin, exhaling through the nose, holding the mouth shut, making an audible sound. Then on the next inhalation, if you want, maybe dedicate or this breath to the lives that have been lost due to structural violence. Holding the breath in honor of those individuals and communities that have been traumatized by this, and then releasing through the nose. Then perhaps do 2 more breaths at your own pace, inhaling through the nose, holding the breath, exhaling through the nose, making an audible sound with the mouth closed. And let's do 1 more breath together. Let's call this the liberation breath. Inhaling, back of the throat, pressing the chin against the chest, and then exhaling through the nose with the mouth closed. Honoring the life of Breonna Taylor and all others that have been killed by the state. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes if they were closed. Look around the screen, noticing who's in the space with us. And as the system tries to suffocate us, we continue to breathe in solidarity.
Thank you, Ram. Bringing us into this space and into this conversation. Those of you who had been part of this series beforehand have seen 2 slides about the Global Alumni Initiative and the Co-Scholars Program, the 2 programs that are hosting this conversation. The only thing I'll say about the 2 programs is that the purpose of the program of the Global Alumni Initiative is precisely to bring people together around issues that are close to our hearts in different parts of the world. To support our alumni and the work that they are doing, challenging different power structures, hierarchies, systems of oppression, promoting equity and justice. We had been working together and bringing together alumni from the Co-Scholars programs, and we look forward to bringing more activities to the other 2 programs that are part of GAIN, which are the Community Trust Building Fellowship and the Narrative Change Collaborative. We believe that the work is done at different levels, the personal level, the relational level, and the systemic level. And the conversation that we will have today is precisely bringing all of those levels together. When we do a reflection about Black Lives Matter and Dalit Lives Matter, we are having in consideration these connections that we share across the world, in different parts of the world, trying to change those systems. So I'll give the floor to Jitka to briefly introduce our speakers, as they will also then share more about themselves, and then we will start with the conversation. Jitka, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you, Ram. It was beautiful. It's my honor and privilege to briefly introduce the speakers. I did send everyone the longer bios, so if you have not received them, I'll type in the chat my email address, and you can reach out and I will send you the full bios. So it's my privilege to welcome Amos, who was a co-scholar in 2016. He is a Burundian-born peace-building practitioner. He holds interest in international human rights law, transitional justice, and Pan-Africanism. He is the co-founder of Tuvugane and program manager of the Return Movement, both initiatives that seek to engage the African diaspora in the development of their places of origin and the current residents. Amaha was a co-scholar in 2013. He's a peace builder, social healer, freedom fighter, and lover of humanity. He is an associate professor of sociology and director of Center for Applied Social Studies. And he's the co-founder and board chair of the Gem City Market and a co-founder of West Dayton Strong. And they will mention more about their activities. Dr. Ram, he was a Community Trust Building Fellow in 2015. He is a longtime educator, art innovator, and peace builder who has been teaching and transforming communities for the last 35 years. He is an international conflict resolution trainer, co-founder of Drum No Guns. Alan is a faith-rooted organizer and strategist for Initiatives of Change USA. Having started his work at age 6 in Baltimore, when he was inspired by a group of pastors working to connect their congregations to their communities through service. And last but not least, we have Rajendra, who was a co-scholar in 2016. He is a dedicated peace practitioner currently working with Nepal Peace Building Initiative in Kathmandu. He teaches conflict and peace studies to the postgrads in Midwestern University as a visiting lecturer. And I must mention that it was last week when Rajendra was awarded to become the, he was nominated to be the Institute of Economics and Peace Ambassador. And Rajendra represents the Dalit movement as he himself is a Dalit. And now I will turn the floor to our panelists. And the question that we are going to be asking is, what is it about this moment that moves people to rise up together, declare their common humanity, and fight for justice, despite the risk of the coronavirus and the limitations imposed by the pandemic?
I think in this moment, and I think it was very fitting for Dr. Ram to begin this process with a breathing exercise, because people who have been living in oppression and caste systems and the different ways that they manifest have been having trouble breathing long before the coronavirus. You know, the coronavirus is a pandemic that affects the respiratory system. And just like Eric Garner and George Floyd, people who've lost their life, had trouble breathing and living and expanding under a caste system, have suffered that long before coronavirus, and have lost more lives under it as well. And I think what the coronavirus, as a metaphor, is reminding us of our connectivity as the human species, of our how we affect each other, how much we need each other. And just like the coronavirus affects the respiratory system, and we're facing a novel coronavirus, so there are many types of coronaviruses. And this is just a new pandemic, but the old pandemic that we face has been dehumanization in its many forms, and as it's taken different places within our society. And so we are using this moment to recognize that coronavirus is only the stage on which the disparities we've lived under are taking shape. And just as there are different strands of coronavirus, there are different strands of dehumanization. And our hope today is not to say whose struggle is more valid than the other, but understand that we struggle under the same pandemic of dehumanization. And what can we learn from our different strands? And in order to form what we like to call the a herd immunity, developing a herd immunity towards the humanization, and understanding as we interact and as we express how the caste system and the levels of dehumanization or the attempts of dehumanization, because we declare our humanity, take place for us as African Americans, in the United States, that we also know our Dalit brothers and sisters and siblings have also been living under that, and having trouble breathing and expanding under those systems. And I'm still heartbroken and devastated under the lack of justice for Breonna Taylor, where someone was penalized for damaging property more than her life. And so there are several ways that the caste system takes place legally, and we can get into that a little bit more. But as far as the question goes, we've been having trouble breathing and expanding within our societies for quite some time before the coronavirus. And after the coronavirus, that still will be the reality that many of us face. And so really using this opportunity of understanding the importance of our connectivity, the importance of solidarity and sharing information across the world is the same type of collaboration and strategy that we need in order to battle and undo the caste systems that we live under in our respective places.
Thank you, Alan. Amaha, would you like to go next?
Sure. Greetings, everybody. Yeah, I think kind of building off what Alan so eloquently stated, I think like right now, like we've known that we have a common humanity, but like I think the virus has put it in perspective that like we truly are interdependent, right? That what affects one affects the other, or in African philosophy is called Ubuntu, that I exist because you exist, and you exist because I exist, and I can't be all that I can be until you are all that you can be, and you can't be all that you can be until I am all that I can be. And so I think like when we're looking at solidarity and international realization of our humanity, it's through knowing that we're interdependent, that we have, Dr. King calls it a single garment of destiny. So in this hour, we're realizing like globally that there's different ways that our humanity has been denied. Like when he's saying dehumanization, he's speaking to the ways that our societies don't acknowledge the dignity and worth of every human being, right? And so what can we do to live that and have that embedded inside of our society, And so I think in this hour, people are really realizing that we are the ones we've been waiting for, and that we can do this together by sharing knowledge, sharing our resources, and really just understanding that that instead of being independent, or instead of just being from different parts of the world and what happens there doesn't bother me at all, just really realizing that we're all in this together, we're all on one planet, right? And so how do we truly acknowledge the dignity of everybody, and through that realize our full humanity and all the gifts and talents that are available when we realize our common humanity instead of all this division.
Thank you, Amaha. Rajendra, are you ready to?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Greetings of the day to you all, connecting us from different parts of the world now. So I'm going to talk about the Dalit Lives Matter movement ongoing in Nepal and in whole South Asia at present. So I don't know if how many of you know about Dalit issues, what Dalit is. So for that sake, I'm going to explain a bit about what Dalit is and how it is like to be Dalit. Dalits are the people who come at the bottom of Hindu caste hierarchy. In Hindu caste system, there are 4 different castes, Brahmin, Kshetri, Vaishya, and Sudra. And the one at the bottom of the hierarchy are called Dalits. So their new name is Dalit, but the old name is called Shudra. And these people are discriminated on the basis of caste. They are called as untouchables. They are people don't accept food and water from them, and they are kind of like discriminated in every respect of their lives. And these Dalit people have been facing a brutal, like experiences in the current days as our this movement started. Before this movement started, so to begin with, I would like to let you know how it all began, Dalit Lives Matter movement in Nepal. So there was a Dalit boy named Navaraj Bike, and he was in love with a higher caste girl, and he wanted to marry her, and he went to that girl's village with his fellows friends. And then these guys were attacked. These guys from lower caste group, the Dalits, were attacked by the villagers of that higher caste group, and they were thrown into the river, and they died. 6 of them died. So it all began from there. And the other day only, there was a girl, 13 years old girl, was raped, and she was forced to marry with her rapist, who was from higher caste. Um, and this girl, after a few days, after a couple of days only, she was found hanging on the tree, and the people like told that she suicided, but investigate, the policeman told that she suicided, but her family and the list, like the activists, we are saying that okay, it was not an acceptable that thing for us. So it was another incident. And other incident was like there was a person called Sambu Sada, who died in police custody, hanging on the bathroom of police custody. He was arrested as he made traffic accident where he accidentally hit a local woman, and then he was arrested later on, and then he was found hanging on the police bathroom. And another incident also triggered this movement, which was of Bijay Mahara. His name was just 19 years old, and he was arrested in the allegations of supporting some murder in the village. And then after a few days only, after 10 days of his arrest, he was found dead. The police didn't allow his family members and the activists to meet the to BJ, but they told that okay, BJ died because of the kidney failure. And there was one video came after this incident happened, and in this video, BJ himself told that he was brutally beaten up, and then he was electrocuted also, and couldn't survive because of that reason. So these things triggered the Dalit Lives Matter movement here in Nepal. And if you see the data, out of of 5 years, like out of 3, every custodial death, 2 are of Dalits. And this has been because of several reasons, socioeconomic reasons to political reasons to religious reasons. These things are happening. So in a nutshell, I would say like over arresting and illegal detention, torture, extrajudicial killings, denied access to bail are the common phenomenon that we are experiencing here in Nepal. And it is, as I said, guided by the religious values also. So we used to have in our past days civil code. That was the first law of Nepal. And this civil code has been inspired by the religious scriptures that is called Manu Smriti, which was written by Manu, Hindu scholar. And in that it was mentioned that Dalit could be treated as animals. They could be beaten up, they could be killed. Even if you kill, you don't have to bear any sin. So it was as such. And then, like slitting tongue to like murdering or killing, burning the person was very common. And if you chant some verses from the scriptures and all, then they would insert a rod, the heated rod on the mouth either, or on the ear, or on the buttocks. So it was the situation. And that's how we feel like it's very important to draw parallel between these two movements. And that's how it began. And we are, in that sense, like luckily this movement began in the time when you had a very big movements all throughout the world on Black Lives Matter. So that somehow, that very much helped our movement in, to make our voices heard. So as our friends just stated, that it is very important for the sake of communal immunity against caste and racial virus. And in this time of pandemic also, we were not afraid of this the virus in itself, because we have been suffering from the caste and racial virus from very long time. And we want to sanitize our societies, our mentalities, our people's mindsets, that, okay, these things are really, you have to avoid it, otherwise we will protest. So that was how it all began, and we thought that learning from each other against Brahminical and white supremacism is very important. So that's how it all began in the time of a pandemic also. And if you see, like, of isolation, we were not even afraid of, Dalits of Nepal were not even afraid of isolation, because we have been isolated by the societies for very, very long time, from the time immemorial. So that was the reason. And we thought, like, okay, and not we thought, but we have learned a lot from the history of the Black Lives Matter, and then history of civil rights movement in the United States, how the African Americans have been fighting their right for their rights and freedom. So that things have very much influenced us. And then you have, like, a very good history from, I would like to recite a quotation from Dr. Martin Luther King, who said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So with that, I would like to, for now, conclude my talk. So that's how we share our pains and suffering, and also the voices together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajendra. I just want to point out, if anyone has any questions, please use the chat and type your questions, and we'll be keeping track and then summarizing them at the end of the session. Now, Ram, the floor is yours.
Build on what has been said so far, because I think the connection is really clear that there's this global political and religious oppression that has been the root cause of the dehumanization of people of color for centuries. We saw the same type of systemic oppression in South Africa under apartheid, as well as throughout the chattel slavery and the structural racism in the United States that was exported around the world. And then hearing Rajendra's stories sounds so familiar to different types of situations or different incidents or different points of history in the United States. When he was talking about the young boys who were basically trying to express their humanity, it reminded me of Emmett Till, who was murdered and body thrown into a river for an accusation of disrespecting a white woman, which later proved to be untrue. She admitted decades later that it was all a farce. But I think the undercurrent of this is that we are constantly, people of color are constantly trying to, and have been trying to justify their right to exist, and counteract these narratives of these false narratives, these lies about our humanity. And I think maybe perhaps it's time to really focus on diagnosing the virus, so to speak, of structural racism, and being very clear about how this dehumanization is linked to these lies about or these lies that support this hierarchy of human value based on skin color. And you know, the solidarity that we see around the world in terms of the response to these injustices is just growing more stronger. And I feel like working to be even more clear about our unity, more clear about the causes, more clear about what the root causes, because a lot of times we have to engage in these debates about whether what we're feeling, what we see, what we perceive is actually true or not. And it reminds me of not the conversation, but the struggle that Steve Biko had around the Black Consciousness movement, where he was espousing the dignity of Black South Africans, but also in a way where white South Africans could tap into their own humanity. So there's work for us to do in terms of our own intra-racial healing, and there's work that needs to be done within communities that have a legacy of oppression. And I think part of our emphasis at this point may need to be more around self-justice, where we focus on what's really going to uplift us and help us build this global massive resilience to these systems, through demonstrating even more strongly what humanity really represents. And I think like right now, dealing with like these constant disappointments are indicative of, so how do we rebound from this, and what are some strategies that we can put in place going forward so that future generations are even more equipped to fight against this oppression.
Thank you, Ram. Amos, floor is yours.
Yeah, Yitka, Eli, thank you for having me and amplifying my voice today. I just want to mention that I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and what happened yesterday is hitting me at a different point, not only because I live in the city, but for many other different reasons. And if you allow me, I would like to paint a picture for you. I was born during a civil war in Burundi and spent 12 years in a refugee camp and came to the United States at the age of 13. And as a Black immigrant, there's not much that I can say in terms of what my experience has been like. Feeling oppression, not only from white people, but also fellow Black people. And with that conflict, dealing with that conflict itself over time, and with everything that's going on, it has sort of a different toll on you. And I want to thank Ram for eloquently stating and reminding us of the self-justice that needs to be done, and the intra-healing that needs to be done. And Eli for pointing out earlier that, this is a moment of reflection for every one of us, for being here. And the things that make me hurt, it's not only the fact that our perception, or the United States perception of justice, does not take human dignity into account. It's also the fact that when I return home and I go to an ice cream shop or a coffee shop, a white man gets served before me. And I think it's that realization of human dignity, or the collective human dignity, that has sort of sparked these movements, and the solidarity movements that we are seeing now, because the coronavirus, even though it was also being taken advantage of as another form of oppression, as you remember, some European dignitaries suggesting that the first tests that on this virus be done in Africa. And I think the realization that the virus does not discriminate on color, race, or any other form of status for many gave room for people to realize the inherent human dignity that we all have. And so for me, another form of hurt comes from the complacency that a lot of Black immigrants have when it comes to the current Black Lives Matter movement and the different forms of oppression that is happening in the United States. And there are different explanations and justifications for that, which I am not going to validate. As an immigrant who migrated to this country for a better life or living, but only seeing that this country is nothing less than what you fled. This should be a concerning situation for everyone. And when I say talking about a lot of immigrant communities from what's going on, the fact that I am privileged to be living in this country in itself gives me a position to be able to respond to something like the Black Lives Matter movement, to respond to the injustices happening in this country. It doesn't mean that my own forms of injustice and oppressions that I have faced in the past or are currently facing are in any way over or erased, but it puts me at a point I not only reinforce the voices of African Americans who are my fellow brothers and sisters, but also I stand right next to them hand in hand. And I thank Rajendra for also giving us a little background about the Dalit Lives Matter movement, because as he was speaking, I'm sort of thinking of myself and the different stories that I hear regarding Hutus and Tutsis back home in Burundi. Another form of oppression, or that we tend to forget that it's still happening, because as you all know, I think the West did a really good job of forming the narrative around what happened in Rwanda to their benefit. So I'm not gonna. I don't want to go and ramble all day, but I just want to thank CS the Initiatives of Change and you all for sharing your perspectives and where you are coming from in this conversation specifically, because it's not. We don't have like a one size fits all solution, or we have different contexts from which we are all coming from, and I think we have to recognize that the root cause is the same for all the different situations that are happening around the world.
Yeah, if I could hop in real quick before we go to the next question. Like I appreciate what Amos just said, and I want to. When I'm sitting here listening right now, I'm thinking about this notion of othering, right? Like race in itself isn't a global phenomenon, but this notion of like a human being othering another human being, saying that like you are distinct or separate from me, and then that process then turns to that labeling of like, well, you're actually not even human, right? So when I heard Regina speak, he talked about how the Dalit were labeled, identified as if you kill them, if you do whatever, it's okay. It made me think of how Black was constructed in America the same way, that like, Black was seen as cattle and property, and you could do whatever you wanted with it, And so I wanted to just make the connection that oftentimes like this dehumanization process begins when, someone is othered, and then their identity is constructed by people in power as being like non-human, that like it's acceptable to do things or treat them or exploit them differently because of some identified marker that separates them from what everybody else considers their own humanity, right? And so like that seems like to be like a common root cause that everybody had shared today that I wanted to lift up.
And I want to jump in here briefly too, because I think it's important to like shift the mindset from the victimization of this dehumanization process to how this inhumanity is a projection from the oppressors. So the philosophical framework, the religious system, the political system creates this false narrative about those that are oppressed. Their values don't matter. I mean, the value of their life doesn't matter. When that light is, or when we put that whole system under a microscope or a macroscope or a telescope, whatever, and we start looking at what's really happening, like lynchings, for example, and we see pictures of mobs engaged in lynchings and children watching the lynching, but there's still this sense of, so these black bodies are kind of the cause of it, so to speak, but really the diagnosis, I think, needs to shift to the psychosis, the other, like, it's sort of a social psychosis. It's a sickness. It's a very grave sickness that has to be addressed and has to be analyzed in order to defy this lie of white supremacy. There's something that we're not really like pinpointing. Like, we know it's wrong, we know it's immoral, but there's some depth to what has created this this hierarchy, and how pernicious it is, how insidious it is, how deadly it is, how destructive it is, so that a Breonna Taylor situation will turn out where, oh well, she just got shot up, like Fred Hampton. She just got shot up in her own apartment, sleeping, because somebody broke in, and because it was the police, and we announced, even though one witness supported that, when multiple witnesses said they didn't hear that, it still comes down to, like, Breonna Taylor's life is not of value, but what is that virus that's causing this this other group to continually act and justify these inhumane acts?
Thank you. Thank you for the points that you have shared up until now. I think we're seeing definitely the connections between the two movements, the connections in terms of the way in which different groups of people had been dehumanized according to oppressors in different parts of the world, and how that narrative justifies or tries to justify actions that are unjustifiable. And that's the reason why I think it's so important to talk about how do we come together to create solidarity and change and challenge that narrative. I'm inviting people to start asking their questions, conscious of the time. Here's a question for you, Ram, but I will invite other speakers also to respond to it. If you feel like, why do you think the future generation are equipped to fight oppression, and why the current generation are not equipped to fight oppression? That's one first question. Sorry, I didn't see the correction. Why you think the current generation are equipped to fight oppression?
Why the current generation aren't equipped?
Are.
Because there's a legacy that precedes us of combating oppression. It's not something that's just starting in the current generation, and it's also it's a model for what we have to continue to do. Like, our elders in the 60s, well, just not really elder because I was born in the 50s, but there's a legacy of fighting against oppression. So it's not new. It's not like we're just starting it. And that same legacy is being passed along. It's intergenerational. And so how do we fight against the dehumanization? We stand for rehumanization or humanization. Like, we don't buy into the narrative. The more we are dehumanized, the more we celebrate, like in the kind of like in the spirit of Azor Neale Hurston. How can the world not see how brilliant we are? How can the world not see how beautiful we are? How can the world not see how bold we are? Look at the contributions that we make. What would the world be like without us here on this planet? Look at what we contribute, and we just continue to reinforce that type of mentality. No matter what this system tries to do to dehumanize us, we continue to revel, we continue to promote, we continue to uplift, just like the Harlem Renaissance. So we create in the 20s. Let's don't buy into the narrative of COVID and our world will never be the same. Let's make the decade of the 2020s the soaring 20s, where we start from COVID and we just create a global renaissance throughout the 20s that will leave a legacy 120 years from now about, so what did people of color do to respond to this virus of racism and structural racism? Like, never give up, no matter what. We, continue to uplift what our ancestors have done and shown us, and we continue to defy the lie and change the narrative through truth-telling.
Can I respond a little bit, Ellie?
Yes, yes, please.
There's somebody who said,
if anyone else wants to, go ahead.
There's somebody who said that I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And I think that resonates even with us, the current generation, with the question of whether the future generation is equipped to fight oppression. I think this is not something that's going to be solved tomorrow or something that's going to go away. And I think by the legacy that Ram is talking about, that we were left with, using that now and leaving another legacy for the future generation. For me, that's what gives me motivation too. Like, knowing that when I pass on, somebody else is going to take the torch. That gives me motivation. And I think also with the global solidarity and all these different global movements, more and more people are realizing the system of discipline that that was left in different communities, oppressed communities, inferiorized communities, where they were disciplined to accept inferiorization, to self-victimize. When an oppressor is victimizing you, you just accept that this is what I'm meant to be, and this is what I'm meant to be defined as. And so I think that in itself, the legacy that was left for us, and the realization of this discipline that has been going on for such a long time, equips each and every one of us to be able to fight for justice.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the question is kind of around who has been sustaining these caste systems over generations, and why is this generation different, right? And so you have to ask the question, who sustains caste and why? A lot of times people sustain caste out of indoctrination, ignorance, and also incentive. That the material returns of a caste system that says, as long as you look the other way, as long as you ignore, as long as you don't say anything, you can benefit from this system. And so, you know, I think this generation also in the way that education has been changing as well, we can actually understand the truth. As James Baldwin says, the job of the Negro writer is to excavate the real history of this country and understand what is going on. Or as Walter White said, that the fascist-minded element of the South was practicing Nazism far before Hitler was born, and talking about the real evil and dehumanization that has been indoctrinated into how we are even to view the people that have oppressed us, right? And so that part of that indoctrination is, how can I learn about a history that enslaved my ancestors after my entire class has pledged allegiance to this entire institution? So I think it's understanding the real history and the cultural genocide that happens, and how we are taught about what actually happened. And so now we have a generation that is more open to actually learning the truth of these institutions, learning the truth and accepting that caste is real, and not accepting the gaslighting that happens that says, oh, it was this person's fault, that casts this blame, but takes the work of Kwame Ture and says to the oppressive society, civilize yourself. Or his brother Rahindra was saying, sanitize your mindset, right? So I think a lot of the work is, and his brother Amos was saying, my ancestors' wildest dreams. That depends on who your ancestors were, because if you're fighting against a system that has provided an incentive to your ancestors, you may be your ancestors' greatest nightmare, but you may be the great hope for the future that has yet to become, as Dr. Ram is saying. So we have to accept and fight the indoctrination, just like COVID-19. It's exacerbated by the misinformation that's out there. When you're out and you're like, I can't believe these people still not wearing a mask, drinking Clorox, whatever it's going on. But like, there's indoctrination and false information that we have to challenge. We have to challenge the system that still provides an incentive to those who participate. And we have to fight the complacency that we may have just because it might not have happened to us yet. And that is what we're hoping to build with the solidarity.
Eliana, can I add on that?
Oh, Rajendra, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I too believe, I fully agree with all the speakers, and I think that the oppressed and the suppressed ones have the unprecedentedly, like the knowledge we have gained is so powerful that we can, as Ram also told, that intergenerational transfer of the knowledge is there. And we now know that our ancestors have, for instance, the America is drenched in the blood of our ancestors, and the Hindu Asia is also drenched in the blood of the caste, the Dalits. So that is the reality, and that we know now, and then we have this all courage also to fight. And it's the age of human rights also. So, and it's age of information and technology. We can move it to our physical protest, to the civil resistance 2.0, that is to say that we move it to the internet also. So these things are also there, and then I think that it's we are equipped to fight against this injustice. If you see me, let me share my personal experiences also. So I have like, in order to challenge the society, I myself converted, and I myself I anyway like left my religion. I moved to some other religion. After knowing that the religion was the root cause of the problem, and then I also was dared enough to get to marry with the high caste girl, whose result would be like a life also, would cause a life also. So so we have that, I think, like given this international solidarity and love and the brotherhood and then oneness and wholeness, Ubuntu, whatever you call, we do call it something like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in Sanskrit. That means like world is a family, but we doesn't exist. That is a Sanskrit word, but that doesn't translate in the real lives. In the context of Dalits, we are not taken as the part of the family. But now we have found the family, the tribe that we have, the tribe of the oppressed one. So I think we are very much aware, and then that awareness is the main our strength to challenge caste and the racial prejudices at the present time.
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, I think I'm gonna hop on that too, because something that keeps ringing out to me, you know, like King says, truth crushed to the earth is going to rise again, you know? And I think part of what's equipped us for this hour is knowing the power of love, knowing the power of forgiveness, you know what I mean? Like, 'cause on some level, we're battling fear, you know what I mean? It's fear that creates the division and creates the lack of interconnectedness or understanding our connectedness. But all I know is like we're ready. You know, it's like I've never seen humanity more ready than this. You know, black, white, you know, all different nationalities, religions. People are ready for something new and something different, and we're healing those wounds that you know. Ron talked about the intergenerational transmission as far as like the freedom movement, but there's also these intergenerational wounds, right? So who's going to be that generation that's going to stand up and say, "Yo, I don't want my children and my children's children to inherit a world like this. So I'm gonna do the hard work within myself and within my society, right, to heal these wounds that we can build that shared future from a divided past, right?" And so it's like now is just that time, you know, we're at that crossroads, and it seems that like, you know, there's probably, you know, multiple visions, but there's kind of two main visions. One is return to a past state of global oppression, and there's one that talks about like more of a global freedom, right? And so like people right now are choosing individually and collectively like how to participate in this hour. And I would also encourage everybody that like, you know, like Ram said, like you know, there's so many levels to this that like you don't have to be always out there on the front lines or whatever. There's so many different ways, you know what I mean? Just how you treat your neighbor, how you build up with your family. Like there's so many different ways to resist these narratives that we've been taught about, like, or these scripts of like how we've been taught to interact amongst each other that keeps everything in place, right? Because it's in the act of doing that we create the new reality. Because since, you know, race and gender, all these things are made up conceptions, we keep them alive by our living out the requirements of it, right? So I just challenge everybody to continue to build deeper relationships, you know, focus on how to build trust, healing our wounds, and truly realizing who we are together, right? Because we're so much more powerful together. So I'm thankful to be here from people all around the globe and just basking in the moment, you know?
I just want to like add one thing, kind of a hope and inspiration for me, like as I guess a young elder, and I think what I see on the horizon, or what I would stand for on the horizon, is just a shift in global leadership to women, particularly women of color and particularly Black women. And the reason I say that is because I feel like maybe this is more from being an African in America point of view, that Black women in America have been the most courageous, the most creative, and the most caring, and the most suppressed. And that they have the energy, they have the love. I mean, it makes me think of something I call the breast milk blues, where Black women actually breastfed their oppressors' children, were forced to. And I just have like total faith and total confidence. And I mean, that's where I'm placing my chips in terms of the future of humanity. Putting, I'm putting my faith in women. I'm putting my faith in Mother Africa. I'm putting my faith in the Black woman as the goddess of liberation. And I feel like they're going to lead us to the mountaintop.
Yeah, and definitely wanted to lift up Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, Opal Tometi, the Black women that founded Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives as well. Just completely in agreement with that.
Thank you. Thank you to you all. We're conscious of the time. And I think your point, Ram, really connects well with this conversation that we actually want to have tomorrow. And it's an interview, but one of our younger alumni, Champrit Kaira, who's also part of our team, with Dr. Samuel Doe. And we want to know not only how to support each other, but also we need support everywhere to open a space for young people in different positions, not only positions of power, but also within the systems that we need to transform. And that will be at the core of our conversation tomorrow. So please go to our social media, our website. You can find information to participate in that session tomorrow there. But for today, we want to thank you for taking the time to be with us here. We know that we only scratched the surface of a very deep conversation, but we really hope to continue with these spaces and to highlight connections across the world that give us hope and allow us to see all of what we share in common, even though we have different experiences, different ancestors' realities, and we act locally, but we are definitely connected globally. So thank you so much to all of you for being here.